Welcome to the Leadership Roundtable, a podcast with Dr. Conway Edwards, where we frequently get together with leaders, pastors from around the country to talk leadership because we believe when a leader gets better, that everything gets better. And we're thrilled today to have Dr. Eric Mason from Epiphany Fellowship with us from Philadelphia. So, Pastor Mason, thank you so much for being with us today.
Wonderful.
Welcome to Texas.
Glad to be
welcome
here.
back to Texas. I
Yeah.
guess. Welcome to Texas.
This was
winter.
definitely home for a while.
Yeah.
For a season of our life. So.
Man, we're extremely grateful. And
I'm glad to be here.
just to have the conversation with you today.
Yeah.
Really just wanted to throw that out there to you about what it looks like. If you could just share a little bit about your church and then even what it looks like, how you're reaching the community that you're in.
Yeah, so we're a church in the urban core of Philadelphia. So people always say, "Are you in Philly?" I'm like, didn't I just say Philadelphia? we don't do Philly Philly region. You either in Philly or you're not. And so yeah, we're in Philly. We're like 2 blocks from Temple University. So a lot of transient diversity, but really it's more long-term urban poor that stay in the community. South of us is middle upper class professionals, and so it's kind of like a cultural economic gumbo, although they're each sector of it as it relates to economics and relationships is just extremely segregated. So when you look at the community we're in, we see that it's easy to come in a community like that and just minister to the college students and the transient professionals or the people, the upwardly mobile, which we minister to all of those people groups. But one of the ones we keep an eye on for our church is we keep an eye on those who are long-term residents, who are working class folks, who are going to be in the community and who are impacted by everything that happens in that community. You know, the college student has 4 years, or, you know, if they grad student 2, PhD 4, the professionals, because we have transient professionals in our community. And what I mean by transient professionals, most people, because Philadelphia is such a hub. I mean, you got UPenn, Drexel, LaSalle, St. Joe's, Temple. You have Villanova. You have, you know, across the river, you got Rutgers. So you have a lot of major colleges. So you're going to attract a lot of people for education. So what they'll do is sometimes they'll stay in the city on their first job, get experience, and then really nothing beyond that's keeping them in Philly. So if Texas calls or Atlanta calls or New York or Chicago, they're gone. So those groups will be transient. So we've had to do mission in that community. So our church is made up of those different people groups, but majority African Americans. At this time, our church used to be extremely multi-ethnic till we started talking about race issues. Then everything changed. And so our church is Millennials and Gen Z. Very artsy, professional, entrepreneurial, passionate about everything. Whatever they're passionate about. And some of for me, I love it, ministering to them, and because it's the hardest people group to reach. We're in a city where it's 95% unchurched. So we're not somewhere, this is nowhere near the Bible Belt. It used to be the Bible Belt of the country. Philadelphia is where most major denominations started and split. So it has a history, but that history is dead now. And so now we're ministering in a fully post-Christian society. One of the largest religions in the city is Orthodox Sunni Salafi Islam. So when you look at those type of stats, everything else is growing except for the church. Most churches, even the mega ones, are plateauing. And we don't even have that many mega churches in Philly. Average church size in Philly is 25 to 50 people. So, you know, so that type of environment and doing ministry in is a monster of an environment to be in, but we're excited about it because we believe the gospel's mighty. Right. And so we've seen God just break through and do so many things in our ministry. So we are on the two-sided coin as a church of discipleship and mission. Same coin, just two different sides of it. And because they're related and connected. And so when you talk about discipleship, we believe everything disciples. You have to understand everything pastors, disciples, and shepherds people. People are always getting information. Sunday mornings, disciples. Small groups, disciple. Right. All those different things, disciple. Those are discipleship mechanisms. So you got 30,000-foot discipleship. You got ground infantry discipleship. So we try to create ways for both and make sure that those ends of that. So we got everything from pulpit to to homes and DNA groups and all those different things that create synergetic ways for Christ to be formed in them. And so when you come to our mission, we do local, national, international missions. So we started and adopted 44 churches. So we have churches from South Central LA to Malawi, Africa. Built some stuff in Africa, support leaders, indigenous leaders in Africa to do what God has called them to do without a Western culture getting in the way of them. We train them and let them translate and contextualize. And so but we planted churches in Baltimore, come alongside of them, Baltimore, Brooklyn, Delaware, Gloucester City, New Jersey, Camden, LA, a lot of churches. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of churches. We got a church we adopted in Florida as well, Hollywood, Florida, outside of Miami. So we got a church in the Bronx. And so God has been really, really gracious. Our network is made up of Koreans, whites, and African Americans. Mm-hmm. So, and Latinos. So that's what Enoch, shout out to Enoch, all of our churches. And you got Africans, Latinos, Koreans, African Americans, and Africans, because we got one guy, he's Congolese. Mm-hmm. I got to do his video today. I got to remind that for his 5th year anniversary. So that's kind of the makeup of what we do. So now we're on the community development side of our church, where we've done church planting, even though we're going to do it not as aggressively as we've done in the past. We've been very aggressive with residencies and church planting because we don't have that Dallas bread. We have to do everything on a budget until God, and we trust in God to provide and all of that. And so we have to move towards aggressive community development. And so that's where we are now.
Gotcha. Yeah. Let me ask you, you said your church is reaching millennials.
Yeah.
And the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
I just this week was looking at the latest Barna study showed that 50% of millennials believe it is not okay to share their faith or to tell people about church, that's just not okay anymore.
Yeah.
And how do you go about reaching a generation that thinks it's not okay to get the word out about Jesus?
Yeah.
How do you attack that?
I think one of the important things I personally think is I don't care what they say. Like I don't
okay.
That's how I roll. So I don't really like all of that. Well, you gotta I don't care what you're not gonna tell me nothing crazy like that. Like, and so I love you, but they like me because they call me Pop. So, or Uncle Pastor E. So I'm like, look, we're gonna engage. I'm gonna show them in the scriptures, and we're gonna talk through the dynamics. I understand what they're dealing with because of the nature of Constantinian Christianity. It's been very aggressive, and it comes. Sharing the gospel for them people don't receive it as transformation of the soul. They hear something totally different in their context. I remember when I first got to Philly and I started sharing the gospel with this dude, and I was sitting in Temple's bookstore and we were just chopping it up in the scriptures. And so he was looking at me really, really weird. And I was like, what do you hear me saying when I talk about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ? You being a sinner, need transformation like all of us do. He said, I hear you calling me to be prejudiced, judgmental, hateful of people, and self-righteous. I was like, I didn't say that. He said, no, you didn't say that, but that's the perception of Christianity. And so for me, that's a caricature of they want to do, like millennials and Gen Z do everything they can to fit into their culture, even though everything's about being unique now, but even unique is not unique, if that makes sense. And so, to have it's only made 20 of these in the world and I got it, like that's not unique anymore. Because everybody wants something unique. So there's a undying desire to fit in. There's an undying desire for acceptance. And not that it hasn't been in the past, but because culture is so fluid and connected in ways through media, through social media and everything, people are way more, I would say people are more shallowly connected now than they've ever been. And so because everything has a shallow connection, you can create yourself. So if I get a microphone and I pull out my iPhone I don't even need I just get my iPhone and start recording with my laptop, whatever, and start a YouTube channel. He's a thought leader. And it's like, on what?
Right.
You're only 20. You don't know nothing, right? So, and not that people don't. I don't want to be obnoxious, like someone 20 doesn't have anything absolutely to say.
Right.
But I think there's no humility. Like the word GOAT is used now. Greatest of all time is just thrown around. In other words, every hyperbole is the mechanism for inspiration, but it also takes away sort of the earning of stripes for someone to have actual under it's like a boat, on the boat God was like, this boat is the storm is rocking this boat, and this guy's like, you see how tall this boat goes up right there? Well, it's twice as deep under. And so that's how we stay good in the storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in this generation, people think because they see the boat on top of the water, they think that I don't have to build the bottom of the boat because I just want to make you take a picture to make you think we're going out deep in water when we're really right by the dock. And so that's this culture,
Right.
perception creation. And so one of the things that I'm fighting with millennials all the time with is like even the conversation I was having you about who I was texting before, I'm not gonna talk about it, but it's like perception is reality. So if I can create a perception of what something is, that's what my reality is. The gospel calls us to something deeper. The cross, and this is how I minister to millennials. I love what you want to be. I amen your desire to be that particular thing. But the gospel gets to tell us where we are so that we can get to where we need to be. The cross gets you to says come as you are, but don't stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so God will even call a Gideon a mighty man of valor, a Shechayo, while he's hiding wheat in the wine press. So it's not that God doesn't call you what you're not. It's just that God doesn't act like you already know how to do it at that particular point in time, but he calls you beyond where you are to inspire you to. And so I think that I'm trying to help millennials like, amen to your dreams, amen to your but ambition and dreams have become such an idol. I mean,
right.
and so I'm trying to say, man, have dreams, but I'm asking you also to be mature. Be mature. Be a real Christian. And so back to your question and dealing with the whole idea of them not sharing their faith, 50% of Varner study. I would love to see what type of statistical design it was contextually, right, because you have another sector of millennials, particularly Gen Z. I don't have my chart up, but Generation Z, they actually, one of their values is a search for truth, which is very interesting. Which the millennials is more pluralistic, like the hip hop generation or the or Gen X. So they have a little bit more of a what I would call pluralism. All truth is truth.
Right.
Everything is relative. Whereas the Gen Z are now saying, I want to search for which truth, what's specific. And so that's why you have, even particularly in the African American community, different ideologies growing. And so dogma is returning. So now with the millennials, you had let's all be in a room together. Let's accept one another. Gen Z, this is a very blanket statement, and then none of these groups are monolithic. But there's also this sense of, who am I? Carl Ellis talks about the three questions people ask. What's my dignity, significance, and identity? What are those three things? Dignity, what's my value? Significance, what I'm here for? Identity, who am I? So when you, those are, like, they're asking those questions in ways that the boomers and busters gave up on.
Wow.
Because the boomers and busters like, listen, it's hard, nothing's going to change. So you gotta get it, whatever you can, and live life out. Post them, the millennial, they said, I'm not going to take over my father's business. I'm going to do what I wanted. I'm willing to shake up the family. In other words, individualism became a part of it. All that individualism wasn't bad. So I think that that's a major thing that impacts how we perceive gospel sharing in that generation. Yeah. Hope that made sense.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like the pendulum swung back the other direction.
Yeah.
So how do you how are you trying to minister and reach? What does it look like for those different groups, for millennials or Gen Z? If Gen Z is totally going back to dogma, truth. What's the different strategy you work to try to do that?
All three of the generations, my generation, which is the original hip hop generation, but then some call us, since you and I are different ethnicities, but the same spiritual ethnicity, they will call us Gen X, right? We were Gen X pretty much. And then after us was the millennial generation, Gen Z. So, one of the things that's of key mechanism is authenticity. Like, my folks on the block, right? Just regular dudes. If I had a light show behind me while I was preaching, they would like, they would be like, "What is this?" Right. This is like those are guys that want to hear 90s hip hop. Like, you know what I'm saying? They want to hear spitting. That's Philly stuff. Then you got my other kids, my suburban ones or my middle upper class ones. They like all of the extra creativity. So in balancing that authenticity, if they know that this is the way you win everybody, if they know that's you, it comes off easy and you can engage all of them, they accept you. The craziest thing on the planet. And so I'm kind of a weird dude because I'm almost 50 years old, but I don't necessarily, I have a vernacular. I hope, I have a vernacular that can swing both ways. I can swing the older generation or younger generation. And so I think one of the things that I've learned how to do in engaging this generation is knowing who their pastors are. Now, the question is, who are their pastors? Who's pastoring your people? Who's pastoring the people you want to reach? Everybody has a pastor. I don't care who they are. Maybe they're their pastor.
Talk more about that. Talk more.
Everybody has a pastor. Like, I don't care who you are.
Even people in your church might have another pastor.
Absolutely. I don't know if I can say that,
you
but
can
yes.
Say that.
But yes, everybody has a pastor. So a lot of people's pastor in my church is the Breakfast Club. You understand? So they listen to Charlamagne the God, They're listening to Angela Yee, They're listening to T.I. Not as some music, but his ideology. Right. They're pastored by not Jay-Z's music, but his journey from Marcy Projects to Tribeca. You see what I'm saying? So you gotta, in exegeting the text, you gotta also exegete your people. And so, and maybe and I got a lot of people, they're their own pastor. So don't tell me anything. I know I follow my heart. That's self-pastoring. Right. And so guess what you have to do? You have to speak the gospel to their pastoral place. And so that means that I talk about the Bible, talks about the heart is deceitful and wicked. Who can know it? That's right. But the gospel also renews your heart. And so you don't ever want to say God knows my heart, because he does. And you're assuming a bunch of good stuff's in it, right? And so, but he can put good stuff in it through sanctification. So that's like, dang, man, I just helped them face the idol. Now they're looking I said, look at the darkness that's in your heart. That's not a part of balancing you like that light and dark side in Star Wars. No, like, this is what, I got people that I have people that left our church that got into ancestor worship, and so they're burning sage and running it around the room, and and so pastoring all of those different things and I'm still learning what to even say to that, but but
I got no idea.
Yeah, right. But the issue is pastoring people and people knowing everybody in context has to. This is what we did to learn what was pastoring people on and beginning that. We do this every year, multiple times. What are the top 3 influences? I mean, what are the top 3 needs in your context? Be asking people that, not leaders, actual people. What are 3 greatest influences? What are the 3 greatest needs? And what do you believe the churches in this city and community are doing to put a dent in those needs? Because I'm always asking myself, are we ministering to the love language of our community in order to develop common ground to share the gospel? Right? And just to be a good neighbor. Right. And so how about that? And so all of those different things kind of shape how we do what we do.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So could you give us some examples, maybe recent examples for you of some needs, and then how you, because I see this dichotomy of who's your pastor. Yeah. You just kind of hit me with that. And I even think of churches now. There could be somebody sitting in a church and they're listening God bless you, on a podcast to another pastor.
Yeah.
And that's my influencer,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
though I
yeah,
live here.
Yeah.
Or myself.
And then read what what they get from that pastor or the perception of what that church is doing onto you here in the church. It's just kind of like, we're not even in the same context.
Right.
That's not even the questions our people are asking. Yeah.
So how do you then begin to pastor this next generation, or even show them what that means?
Well, I'm gonna answer your question twofold. What are we doing? I'll answer that, but then how do you begin to pastor this generation? So one of the things you have to do is you have to do self-awareness of them and self-awareness of the mission field they're in. Many times people live on an online mission field, meaning they're thinking about what's hot in culture. Just because it's hot out there doesn't mean it's hot what God called you to do ministry. My goal is to get people in our church to being missionaries, to see themselves as a part of their identity as a Christian, as a missionary. Under worshiper is missionary, if not two sides of the same coin. And so for them to really, like, we go on prayer walks. So and what we call action walks. So we'll go in the neighborhood, pray for people, and actually get our people talking to actual people in the community, particular people that catch a train or drive instead of the people that walk. And they people go out there and begin to say, I never knew this was here. I never knew that this need was here, molestation issues, or I didn't know this was a food desert. Like, I'm looking around, all I see is bodegas. I don't see any grocery stores. And the only grocery store is that one. But in this one zip code, there's 60,000 people. So how do you have one grocery store that services 60,000? That's impossible. So they have to get their food from elsewhere. Either they're going out of their community, but most of the people don't leave their community ever. And so they're going to the corner store. They're getting salty food. They're getting old produce, all of those different things. So, they're getting sugary cereals. So all of those different things they're limited. And so for us, we're saying as a church, and that's what Millennials and Gen Zs are deeply attracted to, gospel activism. Boy, you meet a need in the community, it makes them cry their eyes out. So we're working on a project where we're working on a school, grocery store, beauty supply place, technology institute, and business shared space. And so that has like skyrocketed their passion. They're investing in it financially. They're investing in it, saying, because they like, what's crazy though in Millennial and Gen Z, it's a lot of experts in their generation. This is the most educated generation in history. And so they've been well educated. And so we need to mobilize them by giving them a vision that they can plug their gifts into.
Gotcha. Now,
I don't want you to miss that. Got to give them a vision that they can plug their gifts into. That is so
not get
important.
Them on board with our vision.
Absolutely.
Find theirs.
Yes.
Get them plugged in.
Yes. And not just into the church, but into the culture of the city.
Right.
Pushing them towards plugging their gifts into the church and talents and into the culture that they're in. Very important.
How does that generation? You talked about the different socio and economic differences. How does that generation handle those different demographics, those different divisions? Are they more open?
What do you mean, socioeconomic? That's a hard question. I think that they, I think that this generation is very creative. And so with its creativity, it's the old stuff we used to do in the hood. You didn't have a lot of money, so you didn't have a lot of money. You're creative with what you had. If you got one pair of sneakers, you cleaned them, made them look like they were, now they'll go to the thrift store. We would have never done that when I was growing up. Being seen like near a thrift store was that's a year worth of jokes in school to just kill your entire existence for a year. Now it's like cool to pick up vintage stuff. Like the hipsters in all cultures, it's kind of like cool to wear vintage things because sometimes based on what they're wearing, you can't even tell if it's old or new. And so I think that they've learned how to work in Max, particularly where we are, because the cost of living is, above us. Like New York, you got DC below us, is way more. So you have way more economic height, yet, and so I think that a lot of millennials and Gen Zs have done a great job at learning how to exist in those creative spaces. And they'll take a picture to make you think they're in paradise. and they'll look at, that's why they spend their time on their phone, because they're not spending time in, like, this would be a this would be a $3,000 in New York. Wow. Like this room. Like, you broke this up. This is the bathroom. You know, the bed come out right there. This is the kitchen. This is the apartment. And some of them are smaller than this. Wow. Like a quarter less. It'd be like $2,500, $3,000 in the right place. So, you know what I'm saying? So they'll take a picture by the window. You think they're in like this grand place. You look around, you're like, yo, man, this is like, I got a church planter. No, he's not. I got a church. It's a church planter friend. He planted a church in downtown Brooklyn. His apartment is 600 square feet, $2,200 a month.
Gosh.
2 kids.
That's a house in Texas.
So you understand what I'm saying?
Wow.
Yeah. So you understand what I'm saying? So when we talk about the ability, like, they'll run to New York, they'll run to Atlanta with no economic plan. It's just, and but I think we can. But what do we learn from that? That means we gotta train them how to go into culture as missionaries. Not everybody come into the church and work for the church, but man, if you will, that's missionary type stuff. One of the things we have to be able to see, like God saw in people in the scriptures, is He saw the raw material of who they were and how He could shape them for redemptive purposes. You know, the boldness of Peter to just talk, just run his mouth. He's like, you put your foot in your mouth a lot, but if I disciple you, you'll use your mouth rightly. And guess what? He led 10,000 people on the day of Pentecost to Jesus. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You know, Paul is willing to ride horseback from city to city to persecute Christians. But guess what he did? He the guy that would go around all different types of places to persecute Christians, the same guy that goes around everywhere planting churches. Right. So that's the beauty of the gospel. The gospel doesn't get rid of all of who you are. It redeems who you are and uses it to the glory of Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you a question. This is going to be opening something that we probably don't have near the time for. Mm-hmm. What does the millennial Gen Z, how does this generation react when you talk about the realness of race in church?
I mean, so our church was probably a third white. For years, until 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I broke my silence. Because for a while, I was just like, I know what this is going to do. I don't feel like talking about race. But when Trayvon Martin died, Mike died, like different ones, Sandra Bland died. I was like, I'm crazy this is like unbiblical. All this going on in the culture. I mean, and I was always on my little Christian wokeifications. You know what I'm saying? I had some of that. It would spill out in different things because it would spill out in how I did apologetics. But then this was an all-out war on white supremacy to me. That was so apparent in our culture that Christians Christians didn't realize how married we have been to Western culture. And because of that, it's blinded us to where we don't know the difference between Christianity. That's why I got so much people. It's funny. So I did a conference not too far from here last year or year before, brought my entire staff. It was the worst experience I've ever had preaching to like 3,000 or 4,000 people. Wow. I mean, because the company, the black people were happy. The whites were hot. And I was like, this is like light, what I'm saying. And the company that brought me in to preach, the organization, they got all of this, like I never got that much email. And I got so much hate mail. What was crazy is none of them had a Bible verse in them. And they're explaining, they just said, he's so hateful. I was like, so why do I say that? The millennials, when we lost all those people at our church, like a third, it quadrupled with millennials that were hungry for the church to talk about this issue. And so, so now it's like, and then they see we're not just prophetically speaking against power, we're also doing something about it contextually. So that right there is very important. So I think in this culture, any pastor that's not dealing with the race issue, I don't think they're worth their weight in pastoring. As a pastor, you need to talk about everything that concerns the heart of God that needs to challenge people and call them the truth. If you're not doing that, you just don't pastor. And it's just because this one, people say you're causing division. I say, well, if you don't deal with it, you're not dealing with the division that already exists.
Right. And I've heard people say, if you're not saying anything about it, then you're saying something about it.
One guy gave me hectifications, right after that message. He was here. He was here. Came up to me.
Wow.
And said, I looked. I said, this guy looks familiar. He had tears in his eyes.
Really?
He said, Pastor Mason, I was wrong.
Wow.
All of us were. We just didn't want to hear it. He said, I hope I can get through this. He starts choking up. He said, I've been praying for you ever since.
Wow.
And like right before, either before or after I spoke, and he was the one that was giving me the business afterwards. Like 30 minutes, people were videoing, it was crazy. And so to hear the Lord turn that, I'm willing to take an L if it helps change the trajectory of all of us, because we're brothers and sisters in Christ. Right. So what family doesn't love one another enough to have intervention meetings? If you got a family member that's addicted to drugs, messed up, you got to do an intervention. Yeah. If you love them. And I think preaching and teaching is one of the ways we do intervention in the life of the church, to call brothers and sisters to say, look, let's begin to deal with some household issues. We're looking crazy in these streets. Like Christianity is looking crazy. Yeah. In these streets. Like speaking against, like not speaking, it's looking crazy. I can tell you because I talk to unbelievers all the time. So I hear them like I've had unbelievers appalled at the way Christians responded to me challenging the race issue. They said, why are you even a Christian? Like, this doesn't even make sense to me. And I said, well, Christianity isn't them. And I said, I'm still responsible for them and I'm responsible to you. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Man, well, thank you for hanging out with us today.
Yeah.
We're grateful to have you, Pastor E. I want to encourage everybody to go check out Epiphany Fellowship online. Go check out Pastor E on Instagram and follow him. We want to thank you for joining in on our podcast today. Go check out our webpage, visit1cc.com/leadership roundtable. We'll have some show notes and some links to where you can find Pastor Eric Mason. Again, if this has been helpful, as we've talked about reaching our community, reaching the next generation, if this has been helpful to you, then go out and share it so that you can help someone else as well. Leave us a comment or rate us. And again, thank you for joining us. We're grateful that you took the time to listen in with us today. We look forward to seeing you again next month. God bless.